Today's conversation is a first for us. We've talked a lot on the podcast about the disconnect between corporate and stores, but there is a critical layer in the middle that we haven't really spent enough time with yet. And that is the regional, district, area manager role. Forgive me for lumping them together. I know different businesses use different vernaculars. But as I understand it, they're the first real bridge between stores and corporate. Ideally close enough to see what's actually happening on the store floor, often promoted from the store floor, as I understand it, but senior enough to get access and insight to corporate strategies and often how the business is trying to move, what they're trying to do. And it sounds like when that role is strong, it can protect both sides from misunderstanding each other. So there's a critical translation piece to this role. And our guest today caught my attention because of a post he wrote about senior leaders spending time on the shop floor unannounced and without an entourage. So not as a photo opportunity. And specifically, you said in your post for the intranet, which I so appreciated because I've seen so many of those. In your post, though, you also said, regional managers, area managers, your floor years are the only reason anyone above you should listen to your judgment. Don't let a boardroom talk you out of that. And I knew we needed to know more about that realization that you had and what that looked like. So welcome to the pod, David Miller. And thank you so much for being here, all the way from Scotland.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm glad to be here, so hopefully I can help.
I'm sure you can. My very first question for you, David, is as a district, area, regional manager, do you identify as part of the corporate team?
I think it's a very fine balancing act. What I find with my kind of role is that you're a go-between between the senior leadership and stores, and probably Matt knows about this as well. You're trying to convert the leadership strategy into a kind of common sense on the shop floor. Sometimes policies or issues will come down. And sometimes I don't necessarily agree with it, but I try and convert that to the kind of logical thinking for the store managers to implement. I think just off the top of my head, there was an example where every store manager should work a back shift every week or a weekend shift every week, no matter what. And when you look into the kind of detail on that, a logistical side of that, some stores didn't have an assistant manager at all. So it really wasn't feasible. So thinking about that, and really it's just bringing back the realities of the shop floor to the senior leadership. And just, my kind of management style is really, it's been honest, it's not managing up to the senior leadership team and showing them the actual realities with what's happening out there. You might have a store's dashboard or KPIs that are missing a lot of the metrics, but it might be reasons whether it's competition or you've had electricity breakdowns or unit breakdowns. So there's always a reason behind that, and trying to bring that to the leadership team clearly, which can be quite challenging at times, but it is enjoyable. But you're the layer that's stuck in between senior leadership, store managers, and you've got to try and convert that, because both sides of that kind of status get quite frustrated at times how things are not easier implemented, which is my kind of role in the past.
So it sounds like the answer is kind of no. You don't really feel like you're part of corporate.
No, we're kind of in a no man's land.
Yeah.
So we get the pressure from both sides, coming up and coming down. and that's really what happens, which is enjoyable at the
Yeah.
same time, challenging.
Yeah. Oh, I can imagine. I do a little bit of that in a very different way. So yes, I fully understand what you're saying. Matt, do you think of regionals as part of the corporate team?
You know, it's interesting because someone actually commented on our post this morning, being like, "Well, I'm not corporate, but as a DM," and I paused and I was like, "Oh, that's a good point. I don't know that I would consider that leadership as corporate. I think corporate is like a word sometimes we use to describe people whose decisions we don't like. So if you're a regional area or district manager who is always siding with the C-suite or with the home office, I think people will be like, corporate, you're corporate. If you're someone who is doing what David is saying and is sort of being the balancing act, then I think you are in that like no man's land. I mean, I've had a lot of great DMs that looking at their roles, I've gone, ooh, I don't know that sounds awful. Because I even think like right now, currently, I love my boss. I have perhaps the best DM I've ever had in my career. And I see her like in stores and she completely understands the reality of the stores, but she also gets complete access to why we do what we do and why the decisions are made. And I can see her sometimes having that like sort of like not battle, but that moment of like, okay, Matt, I know you're frustrated by X. And why I think she's a great DM is because she'll just tell me plainly, this is why we're doing this. Like, you may not like it, but there is like a reason. And actually, that leads me to my question for you, David. Do you feel like when corporate makes decisions, I think you kind of said this, but it's your job to sort of like translate that? And my like sort of follow up to that is, do you ever feel like corporate could just say it more plainly so you don't have to play translator?
No, definitely. I think that at times it gets lost in transition, the communication wise. I think a big stumbling block for regionals or divisional managers is that if you don't spend the time in the stores, being a presence there, that's what you're seen as being the corporate part of the company. If your visibility is there consistently and you're supporting, you're coaching your store managers, and as you said before, Matt, you're being honest with your conversations, this is the reason why we're doing this, then it comes across far better. If you don't have any visibility at all with your middle managers, then that is really when stores feel abandoned and you end up having this kind of us and them mentality. And any instructions given down from corporate, they don't really get fully implemented. So it's how well your divisional, your regional manager, what kind of presence they have with your store managers on the shop floor. So that really is the kind of answer for me.
Yeah, there's something really interesting there about, and I want to ask you about this, is how can we bring those sides a little closer together? But I'll start with, I'm kind of notorious for asking seemingly simple but very loaded questions. And my first one is, what is the hardest part for a regional about working up with the executives? So maybe if you like, even when you were first promoted, what were you really surprised to learn about their perspective or lack thereof?
If I can be totally honest here, the lack of listening skills. That was the biggest. Really, they had their own kind of agenda, and you would try to influence that and show a common sense kind of way of doing stuff, but you would just get shut down and they wouldn't listen to you. So that's the biggest thing, to listen to your middle layer management wise. Sometimes they've got their own agenda and they've made that mind up. I had an experience where it was like the senior leadership were like a kid in a candy store. They would try every new service or every new product and never finish that service or product. And really, we were spending money for the sake of spending money. And at the same time, we were trying to conserve money in stores. And sometimes I didn't really see the logic in it. So that was a frustration for me. And I would be totally honest with that feedback back to leadership. But again, it just wasn't listened to. So really, there's some development work there for leadership skills as to listening. And it would be quite amazing to see how that is throughout the kind of corporate environment.
Yeah.
I've maybe been
Thoughts
too
on
honest
that?
there.
Never on this pod. Never. Matt, I could see you nodding in affirmation. Big feelings.
No, I'm laughing at the kid in a candy store analogy, because in certain companies I've worked for, it has been that way where they're like, let's try this new thing. It's like they don't filter themselves and there's no one to filter for them, but they don't trust, it sounds like they don't even trust regional leadership to be the filter either. So then every idea that someone thinks of becomes something they want to execute. And the thing for me that's interesting is if you work for a public company and you listen to like an investor call, they talk a lot about the year, about the quarter, these like big swaths of time that have a lot of data points. But then when it comes to their ideas that they want to like kid in a candy store, they give something like a week and they're like, okay, guess it didn't work. Let's try something new. And it's like, we don't have enough data points around even something as simple as a visual merchandising change, right? Like a week is not enough time. We need to go through several weekends. We need to see a couple of rainy days, a couple of sunny days. We need to see maybe an event in town, maybe 2 events, maybe a holiday. Like you really need to see a lot of things happen to really know, is this working? Is it not? Or is it somewhere in the middle and we can learn from it and adjust?
Yeah.
Versus okay, we're scared because we haven't made what we need to make. Let's make this move. And then 2 weeks later, they're like, okay, it's not working. Let's move this. And I'm like, okay, now your employees are frustrated, but also customers are confused. So now you're not going to see what you need to see. But the kid in the candy store thing was the perfect analogy.
Can I ask, Dave, because it sounds like you tried to have conversations with them about maybe something like this, right? Like you need more time to let this play out to see if it will actually work.
Yeah.
What was the response you got? What was the reasoning for no or moving on?
Just moved on to the next conversation. There was just no acknowledgement of it. I mean, for example, I had a conversation around growth for the stores themselves. It was convenience stores that I used to cover, convenience forecourts. So there was a massive explosion in home deliveries. We've got Deliveroo and Uber Eats over here. I'm not quite sure we use it across yourselves. But there's about 4-5 different players that Just Eat within the marketplace. And we had trialled Just Eat in some stores, half the estate, and it was very successful. Brought in about an extra 1.5 million in turnover for very little work doing that. So I was keen to get the other 4 kind of players into the stores themselves. And the pushback that senior leadership, somebody must have told them at a trade event of future products where you could put all these different apps from different companies on the one handset in the stores. And I've seen the technology, it's still not implemented yet. You know how you get 4 or 5 different handsets for these delivery apps. And that was the reason for the pushback, not putting this product into stores. So for the sake of millions in extra revenue, they just didn't want to do it. They were waiting for, their answer was, well, we can put it all in the one handset. Why can't we do it? And I'm like, well, the technology isn't there yet. Well, we'll just do that. We'll wait till it comes out. So we're sitting there with the only retailer within the marketplace who doesn't have all these platforms waiting for the next technology to come in. And that was, because we'd seen a great, fantastic new technology at a trade show, we didn't want to move forward for it. So that kind of example of listening skills. So
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Only because, well, it's like redundant to say this, but so short-sighted because, in my opinion, the way customers work, right? Especially with all of these apps. Like, so in America, we have just as many apps. We also have, I mean, I guess Uber Eats is everywhere, but yeah, so we have Uber Eats, we have DoorDash, we have Postmate, we have all these things. And the thing about customers is that a lot of them have loyalty to one. So if you're not on the one they're loyal to, they'll just go somewhere else, even if they're also loyal to you, because convenience wins, ease wins.
yeah.
So that's just interesting because when I worked, I used to manage a Starbucks and we had all the apps and one came through our register, one came through a separate tablet. Like you just kind of had to manage the different things. And quite frankly, as inconvenient as it was, like even from a field level perspective, as inconvenient as it was to have multiple places to go to get the orders, there are some months that I would not have bonused the way I bonused if I didn't have one of those platforms. So I was thankful to have them all.
I mean, that kind of leads to my next question. David, did your stores like it? Did they want to keep it?
Yeah, they were absolutely fine. They were, as I said, it was the future. We were progressing to the next level. It was bringing in next revenues. It was securing, as Matt said, it was securing, bonuses. So yeah, they were more than happy to do it. But because leadership seen these 5 different messy tablets potentially at the counter area, no, we don't want that. We've seen where the future is. And I'm like, well, the future's still not here yet. So let's just get the tablets in just now. So,
Yeah. And so did you have to have any difficult conversations with stores about, yeah, we're canceling this, we're not doing it? Or were they kind of indifferent?
it didn't get to that kind of progression. We were still in talks with the companies ourselves. We had Just Eat in stores. We were in discussion with a company called Snappy Shopper. And we were just within reach of putting it into stores as a second provider, and it just got shut down.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm paying attention to your wording, and I think you're being generous in saying listening skills. Because to me, listening skills is like it's being present. It's trying to understand, the person who you're speaking with and the situation they're in. But do you think it's listening skills, or do you think it's not enough regard for your expertise?
I think there is some part in that as well. As I said, I think people have got their own agenda and they want to go through that, succession of how they implement things. Yes, I do agree with that. Sometimes I think it's an experience as well. I think senior leadership, I think some people are parachuted into those positions where they haven't worked their way up from the shop floor, they haven't worked in the store, they haven't been a store manager for whatever circumstances it's been. They've maybe been an external hire from a different industry, or, they've been succession planned quite quickly. And I think that does show at a senior level. And Matt, I know yourself as well, you should really use that experience within your stores and your regionals and your divisionals to give you that great information as to what their experience has been over the last 10, 20 years. I mean, I was 11 years as a store manager. I've worked in retail for 26 years. I've worked in the field for 12 years. So I think I've learnt a lot in that time and tried to use that experience for senior leadership and for other colleagues as well.
Yeah. I'm curious, do you think regional is where the floor experience usually stops? Is that, is it kind of like VP and above where having floor retail experience is not a prerequisite?
I think it stops probably at head of departments, like head of retail and head of operations. It probably stops at that level. And then above that, you have your graduates and you're outside of the sector wise above that. So I think it really does stop
Nice.
at head of departments in retail.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. I would agree with that assessment just based on people I've worked with. I do think it harkens back a little bit to our episode about like ego, just because I think, I had a really great VP when I was at Williams Sonoma, and I think she's now the president at Crate and Barrel potentially. And she'd never worked store level in terms of like store management or anything like that. She like kind of started her career on corporate side, but she was so like honest about that. Like when she came into stores, like very like, I've never done this. So tell me what is the hardest thing? Like, what do you need? What could be helpful? I mean, there's a reason she was like everyone's favorite VP I've never seen people so upset when a VP has left. So I think to your point, David, like it's listening, it's not having the experience. And I think it's also sometimes not wanting to admit like what you don't know. And just being open to hearing what you don't know.
Well, I mean, you've touched on that point, Matt. Don't you think ego has got a lot to do with working in retail? I think it affects mostly everything. I was trying to be diplomatic with listening skills, so I think ego is probably the biggest one. That's maybe what I was trying to touch on. I think is ego is front and center. I think and everything. I think so.
Yeah.
Because I mean, even in roles, I mean, I don't think me and Becky have talked about this a ton, but even in roles that are not like right now, we're just talking obviously because you're here about sort of like the structure of, district, regional, VP. But I think it's also in other corporate functions that have nothing, I don't want to say nothing to do. They have everything to do, but they're not in the chain of command. So I've worked with even people in like, say, inventory allocations who've never worked in stores because they like maybe went to college for some sort of, I don't even know, maybe inventory management or some sort of distribution or logistics career. Now they're in inventory allocations and you try to explain why you need more of a product or why you want less of a product even, or whatever the case may be. And they're not willing to listen because they have like the charts. They're like, but the charts say, I'm like, okay, I love that for you. I love that you love charts. I love charts too. But also, and then you end up in this tangly weave of like, now you have to get your regional. I think that's sometimes the store manager struggle is like, you're like, okay, I can't get inventory directly. So I got to go to the regional to convince them I need what I need. And then hopefully they can be in the fight with me. If you have a good one, they will be. But I think kind of one of the things I'm realizing as you're talking is you kind of have to choose, to use a phrase I use way too many times. Like you kind of have to choose in your role, I think, like what hills to die on, because you can't go to the people above you for every fight your store teams need. Like you have to choose. Yeah. And I'm kind of curious, actually, how do you personally, like what is the filter you use to go, okay, my store managers really need A, B, and C, but I know I can't win all those battles, so I'm going to pick one. Like, what is your filter for that?
I think the biggest thing I find is that if you get departments, as you said there just now, or heads of departments, working in a silo effect, is you're trying to smash that and get them to work together with all the other departments within the company. Communication is the biggest thing I find. For example, you have stores that will, attack head office and say head office are demanding this paperwork or demanding that paperwork. And then head office's side of the story will be stores never do it right. They never do this or they never do that. They never implement that planogram. And I'm saying, right, well, what have you done about it? Have you spoke to the store manager? Does the store manager even know what they're not doing right? No, I just expect them to know how to do it. So that's the big thing for me is I try to get them to communicate with each other. Whether that was a Zoom call every week and heads of departments would be on that call and go through what what their priorities are, what their issues are, what they have to fix. And it kind of smashed away those battles, I find, because they then started to work together. They would set out, right, this is what we have to do by next call. Come back on the next Friday's call. Have we solved those issues? Yep, we've done it. We've got the planograms implemented, or the bays weren't big enough for it. Right, we'll give you a different planogram, whatever reason. So really, that's the big thing. You're saying pick your battles. I think if you forward planning wise, if you don't even have those battles to start with, and you get the department speaking with each other, I think there's no reason for that. But it's to remove the whole silo effect, which is the biggest thing that I used to implement.
You're like a marriage counselor for two parties. Like,
Sometimes it felt with that.
so this is actually something I've been thinking about in the last 2 weeks, actually. It was going to be a LinkedIn post, but I didn't put it up yet. But this is so random, but do you think that, speaking of communication, that phones, and I don't mean cell phones, I mean like the store phone, like the actual phone,
Yeah.
is underutilized in communicating to stores? And the reason I'm asking this, just to give some sort of context, is because sometimes I think stores are getting a lot of communication, sometimes from regional, not even necessarily like a corporate entity, or sometimes like a side corporate entity, like let's say the people in charge of maintenance, so like HVAC and all that stuff. And they're sending emails like, hey, did you see this? Can this person be there? The tech's going to be there. And sometimes I think, the store phone is a public number you can Google. If you just called the store, we could resolve 6 of these emails in about 10 minutes. Do you think that that's practical? Do you think there's a reason that people default to email? What's kind of your take on that kind of communication?
No, I totally agree. I think that emails are overused. I think the telephone use is a brilliant idea. And I think really, from my own experience, I did try and not use so many emails. I would call all my area managers first thing in the morning and see if they needed any help and any support. I think anything that's in an email is probably easier speaking over the phone. You know yourself, you're a store manager, you're on the shop floor, you're out the office for 2-3 hours, you come back in and you've got 60 emails lying there of just absolute verbal diarrhea. I think, and most of the time when I was a store manager for one of the bigger brands in the UK, I used to just delete it. I didn't even read the email because it was just nonsense. It was somebody sitting in a head office in London just sending out generic newsletters, or it was just verbal diarrhea, I felt. But no, I totally agree with telephone usage. I think a lot of stores are still designed with the actual physical phones are connected to the desk or the office. So if they can have a hands-free, yeah, brilliant, and that would cancel out that kind of issue. But no, I think if you're spending most of your time sitting in the office reading emails, then you're losing the whole point of being a store manager, really.
The deleting them thing is very funny. I just in my work, one of the main things I do is a lot of corporate departments will come to me asking for an awareness campaign because they're certain that the reason stores aren't doing or understanding or believing or feel a certain kind of sentiment for something is because they don't know, and so we need to tell them more. And I'm very often trying to encourage them to explore what their actual experiences and their day-to-day on the floor, and are there maybe things that they are being asked to do or told to do that are eroding trust in that thing. It's not so much that you need to tell them more that something is good or that you are a good company or something, but you need to actually impacting experience. So yeah, good to know that those emails are going right into the virtual recycling bin. if I could flip this on its head a little bit, David, and we've been talking a little bit about what you wish corporate leaders or departments understood about the floor. Is there anything you would hope store leaders or, field employees understood more about the corporate position?
That's a good question. I think it's communications that goes both ways with the corporate and the store level. I think sometimes they hide information how successful the company's actually doing for itself. So really sharing that kind of P&L, what our plans are for the next 12 months, where we're going, why we're doing this, why are we cutting payroll budget? Well, there's an intense kind of cost of living within the UK over the last couple of years due to inflation. Just a wee bit more communication-wise with the stores, why they're actually doing things. Because if you got a store manager that's had 40 hours taken off their labour budget every week, they're going to get really frustrated by that. So it's how we deliver that message to the store as well. Your store really is, your costs have been massively impacted by landlord fees or whatever, or the Iran war is hitting the cost of fuel, transportation. It's going to feed into everything else. So really, it's that kind of communication wise. I would hope would get better. Convenience stores are changing dramatically because they have all these different services now compared to what's came before. You've got all these parcel lockers. You've got various different services. So colleagues are doing far more compared to 5-10 years ago. So how has the job changed? How has the job changed for store managers in any kind of retail? It's all click and collect now. Customers are far more savvy with buying stuff off of Amazon or wherever else. So they're very price sensitive to stuff as well. So it's really it's looking at that kind of aspect of retail, I would say.
Yeah. And I know Matt and I have talked a lot about, Matt is hungry for that context that you talked about, right? He wants to know why all the time. But it doesn't seem like it's typical for corporate to want to be transparent in that way. And sometimes I'm not sure if it's because corporate leaders, they know store managers are so busy and they don't want to burden them with the details that don't really change anything. Mm-hmm. Or if it's something else that it's I don't think they will understand, or there's some kind of risk with sharing this level of information. Have you been a part of any conversations where you've been told maybe not to share something for any reason?
Not my experience, no.
Yeah.
Some of the P&L data, I would say so. How profitable the stores are, for sure, but nothing else other than that. So
that's interesting. You've been asked at times not to share some P&L information with the stores that are,
Yeah.
Matt, you have big thoughts on that?
I mean, it depends on the brand. I mean, some companies are really transparent about individual P&Ls or even district P&Ls. I mean, when I worked for Gap Inc., I could see my whole districts. I could download anyone's if I wanted to. And there was sort of this trust that I wasn't going to go, do some sort of insider trading with that information. And then there's companies that don't even let you see your own because they don't really want you to know how much they pay, to David's point, how much they pay for landlords or some of those other fees that technically I can't change. So I think some companies, why would we give you information? It's not like I'm going to go to the landlord and try to negotiate a better rate. But the counterpoint for me is knowing how much the company spends in these things I can't control helps me understand why you might be pulling labor or other resources from me. Because if you are hey, I work somewhere where the rent, we weren't profitable and we were never going to be profitable because of the rent. And it was sort of understood that we were just there for visibility and almost like marketing, like where this store location is marketing. But but my goal was to get as close to break even as possible. And the thing is if they had never shared with me what the rent was, I would be like, how much money do I really have to make here? I mean, when I found out the rent for that particular store was $80,000 a month, that's when you're like, oh, wow. And the thing is, my payroll budget, it's very rare that your payroll budget isn't your most expensive thing. And so that was the first time I'd ever worked somewhere where payroll, you couldn't cut payroll enough to make $80,000. Like there was no balancing that. So you had to balance sort of keeping lean inventory, but not hurting sales, which also explained why when I first started there, the allocations team was very scared by some of the orders I placed because they felt they were too big and I was holding too much inventory. And again, if someone had just told me you can't order more and gave me no context, well, I would be like, but I need more. I want to sell more. But knowing all of the financial data helps you understand why corporate's making decisions. And as David's talking, I'm also kind of having this aha of maybe most corporate teams think that it's people in David's role to trickle that context down. And that might be where some of the information kind of stops. Because I think across all of the regional and district managers I've had, the best ones, like the one I currently have, are giving me the context that they find out in sort of a bigger meeting that I'm not a part of. And I'm getting that context because they're sharing it and because I'm asking. But I don't know that my DM shares that with everyone because maybe not everyone cares or is asking. So maybe corporate does expect the regional or the DM to use their discretion. I mean, that's some grace, I suppose, I can allow.
Does that sound right, David? Do you feel like you have the autonomy to choose what you do and don't share with your store leaders?
Yeah, I think you do. But again, go back to P&L. It was clearly told to us that we could never share that document with stores itself, any information on it. So really, we're trying to stay away from that. And again, it's sometimes it's not logical, but it's just the way that senior leadership wanted it, because there was quite sensitive information in there with, as I said, with regards to how much you paid the landlord or whatever else. But some really useful information for regionals to drill down into. Energy use, when I think we're paying £45,000 a month just for electricity in one tiny wee store, and we've done some investigation that it was a store that shared 4 other units with other retailers, and we were paying their electricity at the same time for the other free retailers. So we managed to get that resolved fairly quickly. But no, it was kind of taught to us quite strictly, just keep that information to yourself. But as Matt says, it would be really good to give it to the store managers and show them the reason why. That some stores just don't make the numbers, and they never will make the numbers, but they're there as part of a deal or a group or part of a deal for a brand to take that fuel or store goods, whatever, wholesale, and that was some advertising for the company.
Did you ever ask why that was the way it was? Like if you thought it would be helpful for your store leaders to have access to the P&Ls, did you ever ask the powers that be above, what is the hard rule for this?
No, I knew the reason why. I think if we did it, it would have opened up a can of worms with some sites that would ask the reason why are we paying £50,000 rent for this site, and the landlord used to come in on a regular basis to visit the site. So I don't think a store manager having an argument with a landlord why we're paying £50,000 every month for a site would have been a kind of logical thing to do. So
That's really interesting. I guess it never occurred to me that a store manager would be like find a rent amount offensive and take it upon themselves to speak with the landlord.
This one would particular, yeah. The landlord used to come in. The landlord used to come in because he used to run a taxi business for the local golf club because he was retired. So the store was obviously his rental income, retirement income. So he used to come in on quite a regular basis.
That makes me curious too, because something we talk about or we've spoken about in the pod is how the fear of something happening or one person or a small percentage of people doing things results in a sweeping policy that maybe it could be to the detriment of the business. And that's what's coming up here, right? Is this one situation where maybe there's this landlord that came in a lot and the rent was very high, and maybe that store manager would have a conversation with them. Was there ever a discussion about, well, what are the cons of having this policy, and could they potentially, could reversing this potentially bring it, have an ROI that is better than not?
I think it would create far more ownership of the store managers itself. They would get right into the detail as to, it shows them basically everything, what's going on their side. Margin for each department within the store, what you're making, wholesaler cost, rebate costs. You do have of course, your labour costs in there, but just everything that affects the business, maintenance, why things are not getting repaired. Well, we've just spent £5,000 fixing your air conditioning, and last week we can't spend another £5,000 because you've left it on all night and it's burnt itself out. So that kind of thing. So everything that's on the document itself would help store managers to see the bigger picture. But I think that's for area managers and divisional managers, regional managers as well, to try and bring that message down to store managers and filter it, which is what I used to do, without actually sharing the document itself.
Yeah. Matt, in general, in your experience with your regionals or DMs, do you feel like you generally got sufficient information to run your business as best you could?
Yeah, I think in most companies, there's a lot. Well, I think there's two extremes actually that I've witnessed, now that I'm thinking about it, where you get all the information and are really given a high level of not only autonomy, but like expectation, because I do think there's a direct relationship rather, between how much information you're given and what the expectation is. Because I think the more information companies give you, the more they're like, okay, we're going to treat you like an adult, so to speak. And I think the less information they give you, not that the standard isn't still high, but I think you're not as expected to pull as many levers, I guess is the best way to put it. Like, if you're not given a lot of information, I think a lot of times you're expected to focus on, say, the basics of like sales, inventory, etc. Where in companies that have given me like full P&L access, it's my job to really scrub that from like top to bottom and even look at like electricity costs and be like, is there a way, like, are we leaving the lights on all night? Like, and like down to those nitty gritty details, because some companies, my bonus wasn't based on sales. It was actually based on net contribution or like flow through at the bottom of the P&L, which honestly, my favorite companies to work for, just because it's actually, to me at that point, you're actually running a proper business. I will say though, what I'm thinking about, and this is just me saying this out loud. I have no idea if what I'm saying is accurate, and I don't think any of us can know for sure. But David talking about not sharing the P&L, and them being worried about certain things. I also wonder, the companies that share all the information are companies that have high retention of employees, and I do wonder if there's a fear in companies with sort of this like revolving door of employees of like, we're going to keep information closer because we don't want someone to say leave, go to a competitor and be like, they're only paying et cetera for rent or whatever the case may be. Because theoretically you have a lot of sensitive business data if you're given all the information and could use it in a sort of nefarious way if you were that type of person. And I'm thinking about, say, like Williams-Sonoma, Gap Inc., where I got, all the information. Store manager retention was pretty high. So I don't think they really had to worry, because if one person was going to go off and share things, they probably could figure out who, what, where, when. But if you just have a revolving door of store leaders, and I'm assuming in your industry, David, there was maybe a higher turnover of managers. I mean, maybe I'm just making stuff up at this point, but.
Not necessarily, no. But that's a good point. That never kind of occurred to me that, you get your confidential, sensitive information. And that may have been the reason behind it from leadership. That's why they wanted to keep control of that. But no, not necessarily a high turnover, I wouldn't say. More for sales assistants, mostly due to because it was part-time work. And really, when people are looking for full-time work and something that's secure, you're always going to have that turnover within that industry. I think retail-wise, you're looking at potentially 70% turnover in a year. And a lot of that time you've got students, especially this time of year when they're going home or whatever else, you're going to have a sudden blip. You can tell whenever those kind of high turnover, high spikes turn up in the calendar. But not necessarily store manager. But that's a good valid point that's where industries that do have high turnover are store leaders. Then that would be the logical thing for senior leadership.
What came to mind when you were talking about it, Matt, though, is like what came first, the chicken or the egg kind of thing. Do they have lower turnover because there is a high amount of trust and autonomy? Or are they systemizing for high turnover, or are they, instilling the trust that make people want to stay so that they don't have that problem? Which maybe is kind of leads me to a question, David, how your performance, was it ever rated on turnover or your team engagement? Like how much are you evaluated on metric performance versus people strategy performance?
Well, this is quite an interesting point because before that, a change in leadership, when I started with my last company, we had 5 KPIs, which is the basic ones, sales, waste, strike, those kind of things. And then there was a change of leadership because my boss had retired and we ended up having 25 KPIs of those of those things that you're talking about, Becky.
Yeah.
So it had staff turnover, it had, mystery shoppers as well, it had engagement reports, they were all within those 25. And you really were, it was bamboozling store managers and area managers at the same time, having to deliver all these different KPIs, and how staff turnover, how it was actually measured, was unrealistic compared to the industry average. So actually, the stores and area managers were penalised for that. Again, I had to give honest feedback and stand my ground with that, with the various departments that were control of those figures. But yes, we were, make it a simple kind of answer to it, we were measured in those points and how you affected those areas. Staff turnover was, if you're looking after your people, you're a presence in the shop floor as a regional or an area manager, when really you're going to get stuck right into those figures. And the same with mystery shoppers as well. So really it's looking at, the data you're going to get on a regular basis. But 25 KPIs I used to have, so.
Key. They're all key, all 25 key indicators. Yeah. That's really interesting. So did you not like or dislike having that more qualitative point of performance, thrust upon you? And did it change how you acted at all or how you managed your stores at all? Or did you see maybe you had some colleagues who are also regionals, maybe weren't as strong in the people department. Did they have to do something different? Did they have to improve their leadership skills?
I thought the level of KPIs was quite overboard. I thought, I always love a target. But I think that if you've that many KPIs, it really starts to strangle the bigger ones. So really the ones I would focus on, which financially affect the company, your strong basic ones out there, which is your top 5. I think if you've got 25 KPIs, it makes it. The biggest thing we used to see is that we always paid out a bonus when we had 5 KPIs. When we had 25 KPIs, we never paid out full bonus to store managers or to area managers. And I found that quite demotivating towards the team. And I had to fight my ground with the CCO and the CEO regards to it as well. And eventually it was changed back to the old system. But I think having that level of KPIs out there, it's quite hard in the business. And again, the basic thing that would affect your retention is the people department had to work on as well was onboarding. I think because it was a company that grew that quick organically, that went from 38 stores when I joined it to 100. There wasn't really any standard processes there for onboarding and training. And we did implement that, about 4 or 5 years later. So that's going to impact on your staff turnover as well. And it's working with your peers and your colleagues to try and implement that. But the crux of the story is, we did have all that massive divulge of data out there that I had to pull forward every Tuesday and pull it all for the area managers and the store managers to see all this data. And they would just get bamboozled with it. So they would.
Yeah.
So too much.
Yeah, fully agree. 25 seems excessive. And it's almost like if everything's important, nothing is important. So what are we doing here? But I'm also just always curious to understand how being a good leader is measured, because it seems like in retail, especially, and you made this point in one of your posts, the metrics are the holy grail, and people can end up, unfortunately doing some kind of crappy stuff to hit those goals, treating people not so well, right? So I'm always wondering how companies systemize avoiding treating people poorly. And maybe one way is, you mentioned you would like to focus on things that financially affected, your business, the company. Is turnover on your radar as a cost, something that you need to keep down?
Yes, definitely. Definitely, because you're losing store managers or colleagues and you're having to pay for training when they leave, and if that's a consistent issue. And you can drill down into the detail if it's a particular store where the manager keeps on losing colleagues all the time, then you have to get in there and get that sorted, because it's how the manager's treating their staff, basically. How they're speaking to them. So again, it goes back to respect and trust. I think if your colleagues and your teams trust you, you're going to have fantastic turnover. For me, working my way up from the shop floor, a title means nothing to me. Whether I am a regional manager or an area manager, you still treat people the same. You go in and start a conversation with a colleague on the shop floor. You speak to everybody in store. You speak to your store manager. You really try and build that relationship and trust to your team. And really, as long as they feel as if there's a presence there and they're listened to, then you're going to have a great place to work. And I think sometimes ego comes into it, that I've just been promoted to a regional manager. That means you're below me. I don't have to speak to you because you're on a till or you're working a delivery. I'm just going to go walk past you and speak to a store manager in the back. And the only time I ever see that store manager is when they have to get into trouble because they haven't done this or they haven't done that. And again, it's that kind of, right, the only time I see my regional manager is when I get into trouble. And that's the only time I get a phone call is when I haven't done something right, So that kind of aspect as well.
Yeah, you've spoken about that, Matt, and even, you shared that story about pulling people into your office for something good. Mm-hmm. So it's not always a coaching conversation. Oh my gosh. Well, maybe that's an interesting segue into store visits. If we can, so we have a lot of discussion about store visits. You talked about, I read in that part of your post that specifically said unannounced is important. Matt and I have talked about that too. Funnily enough, a lot of pushback from folks in retail who says, no, I do not want unannounced visits from my boss. But I get why they're saying that, right? Because
Right.
visits as they know them are a performance. Do you think that was the case in your experience? Were your visits typically announced? And did you get the sense that when you were going in, the store looked spotless, cleaner than ever? Everyone was very happy.
I'd never done an announced visits, never. I'd never. And I used to phone up the area manager in the morning and say, right, I'm on my way down the road to Wales or whatever, Manchester. Can I meet you at so and so store? So I would never announce where I went. I would do weekend visits as well when the area manager was off the weekend and just turn up unannounced. So I never. I think it's just a show to do announced visits. I think you're not really seeing the real side of the business. And big corporate employers that I used to work for, we had big CEOs turn up, and it was a massive tidy up with the store for a week before it and get it ready, and it's just all performance and show. So they don't really see that side of the business. Sometimes it is a good thing for them to see it, but it wasn't my style. And once I get settled into that pattern of doing unannounced visits, the colleagues and the store managers they weren't fussed with it. They were quite happy because they knew, it was just me coming out to see them with the area manager. I think it makes it more stressful to have an announced visit for store managers. That's the way I feel.
Yeah. Matt, what do you think? You still appreciate an unannounced?
I only want unannounced. Don't tell me. I don't want to know. There's no good that comes out of knowing. And it really is funny that that's like one of the things, there's always these topics we have. And I think there are times where I say something and I'm like, oh God, we're going to hear about this from someone. And then no one says anything. And I'm like, oh, I guess it wasn't that bad. And then there are things like this that I say that I think should just be the way, that are almost boring. They're so common sense. And then people are like, no, I want to know. Don't come into my store without telling me. And I think if you're, I've thought a lot about this since that happened. That was like a year ago, I feel like at this point. Yeah. But if you're working somewhere and your first thought is, yeah, I need an announced visit, don't ever do an announced visit, I think that's your time to go home. And as you're doing your skincare at night in your bathroom mirror, really look at yourself and realize that the company you're working for has a really shitty culture. Because if the idea of an unannounced visit horrifies you to your core, I would say you're working somewhere bad or you're working for someone bad. Because honestly, even the unannounced visits I've had that have not gone particularly well, I've only had 2 that I can remember. Even those with leaders who I did not respect, quite frankly, like higher up leaders, even then though, they came in, they're there for what, 20 minutes? Yeah. Then they say, well, what is this? What is that? And then they leave. I'd rather have that than a whole month for the same 20-minute visit, because that's what it ends up being. They're never there for, too long. Much less stress. And then I can just, fix what I need to fix and move on with my life. And I also think that it's good for people at the higher levels to see, what does a store really look like? And I think sometimes it is about ego. I think some people want the pomp and circumstance of coming in and seeing employees like a little bit scared, honestly, and like being on their best behavior and having everything look good. I think that's more about you. Don't lie to me and tell me it's about customers. Don't insult my intelligence. This isn't about, if this was about customers, we would have enough payroll to do this every day for every customer. Like, this is not about customers. This is like in service to you and how you feel important in your title. Cause I don't know, your dad didn't love you, or like your first grade teacher told you were never going to amount to anything. And now we all have to suffer the consequences. So yeah, always going to be team unannounced.
Well, how would you feel about an announced visit where you've got a CEO or a head of a retail come in to visit your store, and they don't actually turn up. So you've spent the last 7 days getting ready for that visit, and they never come in. They just went home after that. So how frustrating is that?
Yeah.
You've got the other side of the coin for that. So
It's actually happened to me, so I know how it feels. I was actually doing exceptionally well at a company. It was right before I got promoted to a higher volume store. I was told that the CEO was going to visit with a couple of people. I was working in coffee at the time, and my store had stayed open during a blizzard. We were the only store in the area that stayed open. I slept at an employee's house across the street just so I could open. Like, it was a level of dedication that, quite frankly, I didn't do it to be recognized. I did it because I actually just genuinely loved my job, my team, my customers. We opened. It was great. It was an amazing day. It is still to this day one of my favorite days I've ever worked in my career, because customers were like so excited we were open. Anyway, we took a staff picture that day, unbeknownst to me, because I had just shared it with my DM just for fun. Unbeknownst to me, that picture had made its way to the CEO. And I heard from him in an email, like, this is amazing, like this level of whatever. And then I was basically told he was going to come visit. He came to the market. We prepped. We were so excited. And then that day, my regional walked in with my DM without the CEO. And they were like, so he had like a call he had to take, so he's not able to come. And the worst part is he was born in the town my coffee shop was in. So like he had like, I know you have family here. Like, you can make it here. Come on. Like, and honestly, I would have, if he was home for Thanksgiving, randomly show up on Thanksgiving. Like, say hi. Like, I don't think there always needs to be like this is a visit mentality. I think sometimes it's fine to just, quite frankly, we sell things wherever you work, whether it's clothing, convenience, coffee. Come in and buy something. Just as a customer, don't even talk about business. Just see how we do what we do every day from a customer's perspective.
yeah,
I would love that.
Yeah. Well, funnily enough, David, and as we're winding up, we just talked about and posted about something exactly like that, because we were talking about openers versus closers. And I learned that closers rarely get store visits from their DM or from execs. And then, someone had said, Kit on LinkedIn had said, it's 4 days. When you get cut from the list because they ran out of time, because it's after 3 p.m. and they're not coming, it is 4 days that store manager has, the different employees coming in that they have to explain, someone coming up saying, how did the store visit go? And they're like, they didn't come. And just how deflating and demoralizing and upsetting that is.
yeah.
And I had asked, do you think they know? Do they know how hard that is on you and your team and the store and morale? And she said, I don't know. I don't know if they do. So I'm going to ask you, do you think they know?
I think they do know. I think it's a very interesting point that the impact of, and I've seen it myself where colleagues have asked, right, what's the feedback? And you can see the letdown in their eyes and you say, well, they never came. They didn't come. But we spent all those days getting ready for them coming in. And I think they do know, the impact that they have. But sometimes, deadlines change or other things change at the same time. But you just take it back to, unannounced visits. When I was a store manager, I used to love unannounced visits. I used to love them coming in and, and they would walk about and say that you need to change this and change that. And I would go, well, no, I'm not changing it. That's fine. And gave my business case for it. It's not getting changed, And that's probably why they never come into my store, is because I used to challenge right back. So I used to love them. And I've very rarely seen the divisional or the regional. I think I've very rarely seen the area manager. And sometimes you're quite happy for that point of view. Or sometimes you do love to see them coming in, because it gives you a different pair of eyes as to how they see the business and gives you different ideas. But I know those visits are it's just theatre. It's show, I find. And it puts so much pressure on the store manager and the team themselves. I don't agree with them. I think really just do business as normal. See how the business is when you walk into the store. if it's covered up and you're never really seeing what the issues are, where the resources have to go for support or further training or further coaching, it's hiding stuff, it's masking it, but it's very much theatre. But the kind of idea behind it, I used to love unannounced visits, but sadly I never really seen them as a store manager myself. So.
Yeah. Well, very diplomatic of you to have empathy for the leaders about deadline changes. Noted. Amazing. I know we've been talking for a while. I'll back up. Is there anything, keeping in mind that the whole point of this podcast is to lessen the disconnect between corporate and stores, to get people aligned, to help corporate leaders hear the stories that they don't always have the infrastructure to hear, or the culture maybe to hear from the floor. Is there anything big that you think we've missed? Either of you, any final thoughts?
I think for me, go back to the listening point. It's a really kind of interesting point that I'd heard lately is the senior teams really, do they engage with the whole store team themselves individually? Do they have a listening group or a listening lunch with the whole team minus the store manager or the assistant manager, and really speak to any points or concerns there? The same with do they have assistant managers and store managers separate, or store leaders separate? Do they actually meet with them rather than a store setting, in a listening group or whatever else? Is there something there? Is that something that can be productively used in future?
Yeah, it's really a key part of it for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Matt, any final thoughts or questions?
No, I just want to thank David for coming on and sharing your viewpoint with us. It's been interesting. It's made me also think about some of the things that I've shared on the podcast before, and maybe I've missed some things here and there. So I really appreciate having you here with us.
Thank you. I appreciate the time. This is my first ever podcast, so thank you for inviting me.
You never know it. David, if people do want to get in touch with you or ask questions about anything that was said today, how would you like for them to reach out to you?
Probably my LinkedIn is probably the easiest one for people just to
Yeah.
contact me. So we can just go through that, and hopefully I can share this podcast as soon as it becomes available. I'd really like people to have the opportunity to see it. So
yeah, we will definitely appreciate that. Thank you so much. It was so interesting having you here. It was definitely a link that I was really eager to explore, and maybe at some point you can come back and we can get even more nuanced now that we've covered the high level stuff.
I hope you understood me. That you can understand me. Yeah, I said. But no, I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, thanks everyone, as always.
You're listening to Dear Corporate, Love Stores.